All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar, Navigating the Technical Aspects and Content Strategy of Your Next Website Redesign. My name is Emily Risch, and I'm a project manager and marketing manager at IndieTech Solutions. Today, you'll hear from our Director of Digital Strategy, Seth Jacobs, and Chief Information Officer, Wasim Sadella. They'll share our work and how we transform content into stunning custom website designs by sharing real-life examples. We'll provide you with content strategy best practices by explaining processes like site mapping and categorization, and the technical aspects such as web security and analytics. At IndieTech Solutions, we provide digital solutions and create top quality websites that are engaging, accessible, and easy to manage. Our work in content strategy, design, and development for nonprofit organizations makes it easier for communications professionals to focus more on messaging, social media, and other related work, rather than technical aspects of coding, design, and content strategy for websites. We're here to support your communications team by enhancing your organization's online presence, enabling you to connect more effectively with your audience. Over the last decade, we've collaborated with over 60 organizations in the nonprofit space, crafting more than 100 custom websites, microsites, and campaigns. In recent years, we've been honored with 4 prestigious awards by the creative web design community. As a website development agency, we believe in the power of equality, diversity to drive innovation and create meaningful change. While our offices are in Washington, D.C., our team of talented professionals come from diverse backgrounds from all over the globe. Excuse me. Although first languages and cultures may vary among staff, we are united by our commitment to the causes of the organizations we support. We honor, embrace, and appreciate diversity of opinions, social and cultural backgrounds, and life perspectives. Now, let me introduce you to our IndieTech Solutions team. Wasim Sadella is a Chief Information Officer and the founder of IndieTech Solutions. With over 18 years of experience creating innovative web solutions for nonprofits, Wasim leads IndieTech's web strategy, development, and team members to help numerous nonprofit organizations achieve their digital goals, positively impacting their communities. With a background in web security, Wasim ensures that all of IndieTech Solutions web projects are developed with the highest level of security in mind. He founded IndieTech driven by his unwavering passion and dedication to nonprofit causes. Seth Jacobs is the Director of Digital Strategy. With over 16 years of experience, Seth's passion is empowering nonprofits to leverage their digital properties to maximize their reach and best serve their audiences. He is a champion of smart, agile, and efficient project management and sound, holistic digital strategy, and loves sharing these skills with ITS nonprofit partners. All right, let's get started. We will start with 2 presentations and end with a Q&A. So please submit your questions at any time. I'll be monitoring the Q&A section. Wasim will start us out by presenting on the technical aspects of a website redesign, and then Seth will talk about the content strategy. Excuse me. Take it away, Wasim.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. And hello, everyone. As Emily mentioned, our offices are in DC, and I live in DC too. And I just put in the chat, it's so hot these days, like extremely hot. So staying indoor is the key, or being on a beach. So thank you so much for joining. Just gonna start sharing my screen, and then we can go over some of the technical things to consider while working on a website redesign. And as Emily mentioned, please feel free to ask any questions, and we'll get back to them as soon as possible. Let me share my screen. I'll do screen 2. Hopefully this works. Can you see my screen? Thumbs up, set, all good?
Looks good.
Great. Okay, let's move. Okay. All right. So for like technical, this is first thing I want to say is this is part 3 of a series we started a couple of months ago on thanks to how to prep for a website redesign. And in this specific webinar, I'm gonna cover four things that are related to security, like your hosting, and some technical aspects or technical things you need to think about when you are working on a website redesign. If you're like in the middle of it, you're thinking about one, but also some of the things I'm going to cover today, it goes beyond just a website redesign. Even though you just redesigned your website, things you should think about, you should consider, you should implement that will make your website more secure and just make your life easy. So we're going to talk a little bit about web security in general, and specifically when it comes to web hosting. We're going to talk about plugins, and by plugins, I mean here WordPress plugins. So we're like on the same page. Most of the organizations we work with are using WordPress. We are a WordPress shop, so we're going to be focusing on plugins. And any third-party integration like your donation forms, your CRM integration, if you have any interactive maps on your website, that kind of APIs. And one thing that is not specifically to website redesign, and that's why I put it as a bonus, is your domains. There are like few challenges a lot of organizations reach out to us about that I want to mention. It would be great to think about that when you are thinking about website redesign, but also it goes beyond that as well. First thing first, just want to talk about like kind of like web security for your website, specifically your WordPress. I'm gonna cover like few things. I'm not gonna go into a lot of like boring details, but kind of like give you an idea about the things that we do anytime we prep in to work on a website redesign project. And as I said, you can do the same steps when you don't have, it doesn't have to be a website redesign. One of the first things we do when we get a contract to work on a project with an organization is a couple audits. One of them is a technical audits where we have an idea and learn about like all of your technology stack, like what is your host provider, like what is your website is hosted. That's very, very important because a lot of security concerns, a lot of performance issues could be tied to where your website is hosted. The other thing is what is your domain name registrar is like, once again, like which service you are using, is it set up correctly? And then we do some specifically security audits about your existing websites. Some of the things you could do yourself, all of these, like we do like a comprehensive audit. And some of the things I always tell organizations I work with, you can do this like on your own at any time. That will make your websites way more secure than if without them. Two things on when it comes to WordPress websites that is like big security concerns. One is the users, because if hackers can get access to your user name and password, your credentials, then they have the keys to the kingdom, right? So they can do whatever they want to do. So that's number one. Easy thing to do is to audit the backend, go to the backend of your website, see like how many admin users do you have. Maybe you don't need all of the users on your websites to be admins. They could be editors, they could be contributors, like whatever different access levels you can give them, and try to limit the admin users as much as possible. The second most vulnerable things on any WordPress website is plugins, and that's 99 out of 100 time when there is a hacking attack on your websites, they are targeting your plugins. So you want to limit the usage of your plugins. I'm going to talk about plugins in more details in the next slide, but you want to limit how many plugins you have on your website as much as possible. So just review if you think there is a plugin you don't need, just get rid of it. The next one, complex password. I know this is like, you heard this a million times, not only for your website, but in general. It's so easy nowadays to crack an easy password using bots and systems. Just try to use something complex and ideally use a password management system. And once again, that's not only for your website, but for any online service that you use. One kind of like thing a lot of people don't, a lot of organizations we work with don't know about, and it's an easy thing to do, but also it's like maybe number one backdoor for a lot of hackers when they try to attack your website is the username admin. With any WordPress default installation they create, that's the admin that's been created with the username admin. And that's kind of like half of the puzzle for hackers, right? So you need the username and you use a password. You already give them the username as admin, so then they can just keep playing until they guess your password. So just get rid of that admin user and create admin users with different usernames. Then once again, these are like just top 4 things you could do yourself. There's like, I know there are a lot of articles, and these I selected because they are easy to do, and also what I believe the most or the top 4 things you could do. Then there are like other things that you need the experts to work on and support, like another web agency, security agency. Things like highly recommend what I call WAF, which is Web Application Firewall. That's a step before it's even coming to your website. It's kind of like a firewall for websites. You need someone to set up that, adjust it, monitor it, make sure, the right traffic is going through, is blocking the bad traffic, all of that kind of jazz. And then when I mentioned earlier about like you reviewing your plugin, so that's one thing. But then they're like kind of like next level is really dig deep into your plugins and see what's working, what's not. Even if you need some of the plugins, are there alternatives, right? Is that like a legitimate plugin? So kind of like do like deep dive into all of your plugins and functionalities. One thing that is really important too with WordPress or with any website actually is when you make updates to your plugins or to your website, you want to make sure that the update's not going to break your website. It happens quite often. Some organization will try to update their plugins or up plugin, and then the website is down. That's usually it's a compatibility issue, like the new plugin does not work with the existing code. It could be some technical stuff. One way to mitigate that, or even to fix that challenge or that problem, is set up what we call the staging environment. So there is the live environment where your website is, and then there is the staging where you can, like the dev team and your team can play around, kind of like a sandbox. You play around, do all of the edits, all of the updates, everything is good, then you deploy to live. So yeah, and these kind of like these process and this workflow, it's so hard to do internally. So you would, unless like you have like dedicated staff members to do it, you would think about hiring a third party, an agency to help you with that. Okay. As I said, these are like just like top 4 on each section, but the audits one, like the audits we do is way more than all of this, and there are like a lot of things you could do to keep your website secure. Oh, plugins. As I mentioned, the most vulnerable, technically speaking, on your website if you're using WordPress is the plugins. And we always recommend less is always better. I mean, like less plugins is always a great idea. That's because that will save you, because of, first of all, security concerns, because more plugins mean more vulnerability to your website through one of those plugins. Performance issues, meaning that more plugins will slow down your website. And then another important thing for a lot of nonprofits is capacity. You don't have time to update 50 plugins on your website and make sure it's working, not working. It's just if you have one plugin, is way easier to update and way less time than spending hours trying to update all of your plugins. So less is always better, right? That's what I just said. But how to do less, which is usually kind of like, that's where it gets a little bit complicated, because I want functionalities on my website. So that's where you want to leverage as much as possible what WordPress presents and give you. So for instance, at IndieTech, our agency, when we develop websites, we try to minimize the use of any plugins unless deemed necessary. And everything we do, we try to leverage the WordPress core functionalities, especially now with the implementation of Gutenberg. I don't know if you know the terminology. Gutenberg is kind of like the editor, the backend editor of WordPress. There is this notion of blocks where you can build all of your websites using blocks, and you can customize them the way you want, and you can even create your own blocks that like out of the box. Yeah, try to leverage that as much as possible because Gutenberg is a native word, so it's not a plugin, it's a native WordPress component, which means like they manage all the security, performance, all of that kind of stuff. So try to implement natively as much as possible your functionality, and by that I mean the agency you work with, right? Because I know, yeah, you can write a block that will, I don't know, give you an example. You can write a block to give you a slider on your website, or you can do a plugin. Both are going to give you the exact same results, more or less. But if you do it natively with a Gutenberg block, that's like native, secure, you don't need to update. If you do it with the plugin, that's when it gets tricky. You need to update all the time, see if it's compatible, and you just don't want to go that route. And once again, with any, like I mentioned on the updates for the plugins, staging environments are hugely important with vetted updates, because once again, last thing you want is go and update your live website and it's down and everyone is yelling at you because they cannot reach www.your organization.org.
Hey, Wasim, before
Sure.
we move on to the
Yeah.
next slide, I know this is hopefully we are encouraging everyone to use the Q&A, but I did have a question for you that I think we get from our partners a lot, and that
Sure.
is, can I install my own plugins? And if so, how do I know which ones are good?
Very good question. Can you? Yes, you can do whatever you want, right? Should you, or what is the best practice? Yeah, you can and you should, install any plugins you want. How do you know if it's legit or not? One of the easiest way to know that is to see when was the last time that plugin has been updated. That will give you a very quick, like at a glance, if it's active or not. If last time it was updated like 2 years ago, maybe not. So that's one. Two, and usually they kind of like go hand in hand, is number of downloads. If like 2 people downloaded that plugin, I know this is hard on like people who just launched. Maybe it's an amazing plugin, it's just been launched the week before. But usually, when 2 people downloaded the plugin, it's not like when 1 million people downloaded that plugin. Also, like the WordPress plugin page, it has like reviews from people. It's kind of like people will review if that plugin, but I will focus mainly on, because yeah, reviews are subjective. I will focus on last date has been updated, very important, and how many downloads. Yeah. Cool.
Makes
And
sense.
please, once you install that, it's kind of like updates, make sure it does not break your websites, because sometimes you install a plugin and it will break your website. So be careful with that. All right. Yeah, plugins is like a whole world of adventures. All right, integration. This is, I wanted to cover this in this call because it's very, very important, and almost every website we work on and every organization either doing it, and if you're not doing it, you should do it because it's just critical to your website. It's third-party integration, and by that I mean usually it's in a way of a forms, like donation forms, right? Because you don't want, like, you definitely using a third party to collect your donations. So how to integrate that on your website? There are different ways to do it. The easy way is just to go to whatever donation platform you are using, create a page there, and then add the link on your button on your website. You click, it takes you to that website, make the donation, life is good. But a better way you should think about if you have this set up right now is to try to seamlessly integrate any third-party service when possible, because sometimes it's not possible, within your website, so it looks like it's organically part of a form on your website. Just put an example here on the right, which is a sign-up form for one of our clients we did. It fits within it's a third party, so once you subscribe, all of the jazz is with their CRM, but the look and feel fits within the rest of the website, so it looks like it's part of the website instead of like just like a random form on your website. Yeah, CRMs as well. So donation are very like these are like the top two we see all the time is donations, because you want to collect donations, right? And CRM forms like for instance, this one is a CRM integration with the email lists. The other thing is like when you have like contact us form on your website, you want it to go to whatever CRM you're using, Salesforce or every action or whatever you're using. Another kind of like third-party services that we've seen a lot, implemented a lot, and we use a lot is maps, interactive maps. I just put one on the kind of screenshots of one we're using, where you want to give your visitors a way to interact with your data in a kind of like, user-friendly way, not just like text. Oh, this is for instance, here, there's like different locations that there are some services for that you can hover to whatever state and see if they have that service in that state or not, and how many organizations are supporting that work. Very proven user experience to get a lot of user input. I personally love interactive maps. I do.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about the content strategy of all this.
Yeah, well, yeah,
But one thing I did just want to add that just struck me is that
Mhm.
this is another one of those good examples when it's not something you need to be doing during a redesign, but we're probably going to ask you if you want to, because right now the functionality's really gotten so much better on these things that probably during your last version of your website redesign, you didn't have this option to embed. And another thing that is important now while you're thinking about it sort of in the meantime is if you're shopping for a new CRM. So often we see people looking for CRMs left and right, and there's just no, that's one of those things that might make the difference between one CRM or another when you're making that decision.
Yeah, so
You might cut out here.
yeah, I'm back. Yeah, I got
Okay.
some all right, I'm back. Share my screen again. Hopefully this time will okay, let's see. Yeah, I got a technical issue, of course. Give me 1 second. Go back to Zoom and
Oops, sorry. While he's doing that, if you have any questions, please add those to the Q&A. Just a reminder on that.
and here we go. Hopefully I'm back.
Yep, looks good.
All right, good. Yeah, sorry about that. That was like internet issues. Great. Yeah, and the last thing I want to talk about today, which is like common challenges, like this one is not related to the specifically website redesign, but it could be, and you should think about if you are not, but it's super common that any nonprofit I talk to, I just suggest that, which is when it comes to domain management, your domain name. Your domain name is very, very, very important, and you want to protect them as much as possible, right? Two common things I heard over and over is one, we lost our domain registration account, either with GoDaddy or whatever provider is. A lot of times because the person who was managing that account left the organization, and sometimes not in a good terms. So there've been a lot of instances I've been involved. We try to recover, and sometimes it's so hard to recover those accounts. Not only domains name, the same thing happens with Facebook. It's so hard to get back your Facebook accounts. The other thing is some organizations, they don't know where the domain is registered. Like, oh yeah, we know like this is what it is, and we don't know how many or where it is registered. So usually two simple things I tell all of the organizations I work with is please use a generic email address for all of your accounts, right? Instead of using, let's say for your domain with GoDaddy, you have, I don't know, your like a person's email, use something like web or support or communications that will be shared with more than one person. So when someone is leaving the organizations, you're not in a situation where like, oh, it's tied to that account. Another thing that a lot of organizations don't think about is because it's easy, I know, is like when a third party, like a vendor, asks for access to one of your accounts, you just give them username and password. Don't do that, because what's gonna happen is who's gonna be responsible for any changes that's happening, because it's one password, different people could use it. You don't know who's doing what. Just try to delegate access. Most of the services nowadays have that feature where you go to backend and say, hey, I want to delegate access to someone. So yeah, those are like two things I just wanted to mention as a bonus very quickly, because I believe they are very, very important and a lot of people ask about. And as I said, this is the technical audit is one of the many audits that we do, especially at the beginning of any project, because that'll give us space where to learn more about like what the organization's website needs, audience, that kind of stuff. And part of that is the content strategy audit. And that's what Seth is managing. So just gonna give it to you, Seth, to talk about all of that fun content strategy piece.
Thanks, Wasim. I love hearing about all this technical stuff. About half of it still goes over my head, but I still really enjoy learning about it. So thank you so much for sharing all this. Yeah, so when we talk about the content strategy piece, that's a little bit different. So content strategy is a little less sort of how your website's set up or how things are configured or even how you're managing passwords, but it's a little bit more about the ideas behind why you're going through this redesign in the first place. And a lot of these things are just sort of, a lot of the things that I'm going to go over, kind of like some of the security pieces, are just things that maybe you haven't thought about since your last redesign, or maybe you just haven't had the chance to sit down and really think about it. And so we want to give you, when you're going through a redesign, it really is the perfect opportunity to take a step back and think about sort of what all these different pieces do. Yeah, our content audit, our analytics audit, all of this stuff is just part of what we do for a certain redesign. But leading up to that redesign, or even if you have the opportunity sort of in between, either with a web development firm that has a digital strategist, or if you've got, the bandwidth and you really want to make some improvements, I'm going to go over a few of those things that you can start thinking about now, so you can really hit the ground running when you dive into any of these processes. And one of the first things that everybody asks us about is the Google Analytics, right? Everybody's got them. Barely anybody knows actually how they work. And so having that analytics set up is one part. You might even have something like a Google Looker Studio, which can really customize and make neat dashboards that can get sent to, your executive director, whomever it might be. But a lot of times when we're talking with someone for the first time, they say, yeah, we have analytics, but we don't necessarily know what to do with that information. And so that
We do have some technical difficulties with internet.
I'm gonna say, is that
I told you it's too hot in DC. I don't know. I'm gonna blame the heat for that. It's like 100 million degrees right now. All right, well, let's wait for a second.
yeah. And if you have any questions, feel free to add those now. We have
Yeah.
some prepared as well. Just give him a little time to log back in.
Yeah, we lost him. Hopefully he will be back. So, yeah, talking about analytics. Oh, there he is. Welcome back.
Thanks. It could be the heat. I'm also blaming NATO, who's all hanging out
Oh,
here.
yes.
So,
Yes. There is a huge NATO
yeah.
conference in DC these days. Yep.
Yeah, so sorry about that, but diving back into this here, it is really important that you know what you're looking at when you are looking at your analytics, right? Everybody is so interested in page views, but that's not the most important thing necessarily for you. And so one of the first things that we like to do is identify what your key performance indicators are. So what are the most important things that you're going to try and sort of study or get out of what a redesign process looks like for you? So that might be page views. You might just want more people to see your stuff. You might just want to be more recognizable on the street, in which case, yeah, maybe that unique users number is the most important to you. This example here that we're using from a partner of ours, they also have a big difference here between unique users and total sessions. Total sessions are the number of times somebody comes to the website and visits multiple pages. And so in this case, you can see that those numbers are quite different, which to me would indicate that there are a number of repeat visitors, which if you're bringing people back to your site time and time again, that might be a good opportunity to ask for donations, right? So they're coming back, maybe they would sure seem to be interested in your content. So let's focus on donations a little bit more. But if you're looking at something like your traffic sources, which is another one down here, this organization is actually a great example because before we started on their redesign, their direct traffic was actually quite a bit higher than their organic search traffic. And in the handful of months after the redesign that we've been continuing to work on improvements and stuff like that, in an ongoing partnership with them, we've really focused in on SEO, on writing posts that can pick up good organic traffic because they wanted to increase their sort of general web presence and be more recognizable and get more folks onto their website. And so making that increase in traffic there is actually something that we can measure over time. This doesn't actually measure over time, but we could do that if getting an increased organic search traffic is something that you want to do. Also, increasing your organic search traffic is really good if you want maybe one of your key performance indicators to be additional newsletter subscribers, right? Like if you get somebody onto your website and they're really interested in it, maybe we can throw a newsletter sign up form down there or something like that, just to keep people really engaged. And similarly, on your top pages, which I'm obscuring here just for privacy reasons, but if your top performing pages are getting that good organic traffic, then we would fully support like getting a good integrated newsletter sign up form embedded on that website to make it really, really simple to sign up if you're a new user that might be interested in some more information. So it might kind of seem like a bunch of jumble here, but if you break down the individual sections that we're looking at, you can actually really help to use your analytics to focus on your key performance indicators and vice versa. And then next challenge that we come across often is updating your site navigation. This is really one of those things that you probably aren't going to be able to do if you're not going through a redesign because it's a lot of work. You need to add stuff to your top navigation because either the development team needs it, or you have this new report that came out, or you have this big event coming up, and that's okay. But it can get a little unwieldy and it can really dilute sort of how you want your traffic to flow across the website. And so what we would suggest when you're updating your site navigation is to really take a step back and think about what's the first impression that you want people to give, and then where do we want people to go and where do they want to go? So really 3 different prongs here. So I have an example. This is the Center for Migration Studies that we've worked with in the past. This is their older previous navigation, and this is their newer one. And you can see the differences here, right? This publication section alone is almost as big as the rest of the website on navigation on the new, on the redesigned and updated site navigation. That's because we really, this just kind of grew. It didn't necessarily grow in an organic way, or a way that, really gathers folks where we want them to go, or where they may want to go. You can see here we also focused a little bit more in on the calls to action. Really, once you have some more real estate, you can make your calls to action a lot more big and bold. And again, it really does help to guide your visitors to where you want them to go and to where they want to go. It is also that first impression that I just mentioned. So for these folks, they really wanted to highlight their focus areas, so where they work the most often, because they do a ton of different work, as you can see on their previous publications menu. And so we actually created for them a secondary menu that's really focused on those issue areas. So even if people aren't necessarily clicking on them often, at the very least, at a glance, you can see, okay, well, this is what these guys do. And it may encourage visitors to sort of dive into that work a little bit more. So this is a super important part of your website. We can talk about the sitemap in a lot of different ways, including the footer and the homepage sections, but really having a good idea of what you want your homepage navigation to be, what those sections you really want to bring to the top are, is really going to help you go through this process whenever it may be appropriate. Moving to the back end a little bit more, we, again, are a WordPress shop, and so it might look a little bit different on your website depending on what backend system you use. But in WordPress, when we're talking about tagging, we have tags and categories for our posts. So our pages are the real static stuff. It's like our about, it's our donate page, but our posts are really where the I guess meat and potatoes of a website are, because this is the stuff you're going to be updating all the time. And so when you update that content, when you create that content, you really want to get a little bit more specific here than just categories and tags. Categories are a little bit more broadly defined as like what your content is and what it's about. So for example, when we had our forced migration content pieces, we can actually use this category to really nail down or focus in that content based on that category, on that sort of forced migration space on the website. It also lets us provide similar content. So if you're reading an article and you want to read something similar, we can do that, especially maybe on a page that has really good organic traffic, and we want to encourage people to visit some more sites. So these are really, really powerful, but these are just too broad. So what we propose you do is really break your resources, break your posts down into specific types of content. So in this case, our friends at First Focus, we suggested a separate resource section. So it's not only its own post, but it's its own custom post type just for resources. And all of these resources actually have their own metadata descriptions too. So you can read at a glance what this type of content that they have is about. Similarly to CMS New York, First Focus works on a ton of issue areas. And so we suggested a separate issue area space for categorizing their content. That way you're not just trying to put all of this information under your categories here. So it's a good start for sure. And we highly recommend using metadata or categorization and taxonomy. But we think that the category is really just the tip of the iceberg here. So it's something to build off of. It's something to think about, especially if you have a category section that's just all in one piece right now. You can really build off of that in a more specific, nuanced way. And that's something that we often work through with you as we're going through a redesign, but it's a little technically complicated. So it's probably not something you're doing on your own unless you have a developer in-house, but it's something to be thinking about ahead of time for sure. And last, but certainly not least, calling audiences to action. That is the number one thing that plays into all of those key performance indicators that I talk about. You often have so many things that you want somebody going to your website to do. We hear a lot. I want people to donate. I want people to sign up for the newsletter, apply for a job, read some reports, and read the blog. But then they don't find that their visitors are actually doing any of that. And so I think when everything is important, nothing is important. And so it really does come down to focusing on 1 to 3 key performance indicators. And that's not to say that the other stuff isn't as important, but sorry, it's not to say that it's not important, but maybe it's not the number one thing that you want to look at in the next, say, 6 to 9 months. That's why creating this sort of key performance indicator plan, tracking it with analytics, and making sure that there's a good call to action space sort of in your navigation and across your website is super important. And so what we'll often do is not only will we go through the content strategy design, but we'll go through a content strategy audit, but we'll go through a more broad audit too that looks at the strategy in general. And so it solicits some of these questions. And you can see here, this is an example from a partner of ours where you can sort of see, donation. There were 5 responses towards donation, 4 for learning more about the organization, and for contacting, a specific department member. And so this can sort of help to create that framework if you don't already know what your key performance indicator should be. But once you do have sort of those key performance indicators identified, it's not just as simple as throwing a donate button up on your homepage and calling it good, right? I think we've actually touched on this a few times now, is it's integrating those key performance indicators consistently throughout your website. And that is something that you can do sort of in between, not if you're going through a website redesign, but if you are going through a website redesign, think about it consistently. Because if you have your donation form only on the homepage, but somebody reads a really compelling piece that also, gets at the heart of what your organization is doing, why not put a donate button there? You want to make it easy for people to engage in the way that you want them to do, but you don't want to overwhelm. So that's sort of the balance we're trying to strike here. And that is where those integrated donation forms really come into play, and just thinking about your analytics too. So see if once somebody goes to your page that might be doing really well on Google, or it might have good SEO, do they sign up for the donation form, or do you want to do they sign up for your newsletter form, or do you want to draw them to some similar content so they might continue to engage for longer than just the first time? So yeah, this is a huge piece of it. None of this exists in a vacuum. I think Wasim sort of touched on some of these technical aspects, but things like integrations, like having good plugins, this all comes back to creating a good, solid redesign. And it's something that, we are more than happy to help you with. But it's also something that I think everyone should, at least in part, feel empowered to start thinking about some of these strategies on their own, and how you can go about incorporating them into your website. But last but not least, speaking of calls to action, I did want to plug ours. Our website actually has a contact us form at the bottom of every page. And it's because contacting us is our #1 call to action. So I encourage everyone to come visit our website, check it out. We try to practice what we preach, so hopefully you'll find some good web strategies there as well. But you can also check out our projects and see what we've been up to. So thanks.
All right, thank you so much, Seth and Wasim. We still have time for questions if anyone has any. We have prepared a few while you're adding any last questions. One of the first questions we have is, how do organizations drive more of their target audience to their website? It's a big question, I know, but
It sounds like a me question. Yeah, it's a great one. And I think that I did touch on some of the things that are big here. And the #1 thing that I'm going to say is that your website does not exist in a bubble. It comes from your web traffic, can come from social media. It can come from doing well on Google. It can come from your email and newsletter, but you should be thinking about who your target audiences are and where they're coming from in order to arrive on your website. Because it's going to be a lot different if somebody's randomly finding you on Google versus being a longtime newsletter reader. And that's going to change sort of how you want to respond to them, and really drive them towards some of your key performance indicators. But getting them to the website at first is another thing. And I'm only going to touch on the web strategy side of this. There's a lot more you can say about, getting people to organically sign up for newsletters and having a good following on social media, TikTok, all that. But the number one thing I would say if you want to drive traffic directly to your website is have good SEO. The SEO tools that we have available to us nowadays are, they're working. They're really doing a lot of things that help to drive that traffic. So we use Yoast. It's Yoast a lot here. I've also heard of Rank Math. And one thing you can do without any technical knowledge, obviously first vet your plugins, make sure that everything is fully up to date before you install any new plugins. But if you do use an SEO plugin, set your metadata descriptions and have a plan for some of your specific pages that you can make sure that that Google can read it. And sometimes that's also needs to be read by people, but sometimes it's just the technical pieces that sit in the background.
All right, thank you. I have another question. What happens if my website gets hacked? Now, I'm sure that's not a question that everyone thinks about right away because they're thinking, oh no, my website's not going to get hacked, but it happens more than you think. Go ahead, Wasim.
Yeah, what happens? That's a very bad day in the office, right? Like when website is hacked. That's kind of like the worst that could happen. Yeah, before it's like what you should do or can do. Just want to mention briefly discuss what Emily said. Like a lot of organizations believe they're not a target, which is 100% true. Like most of like small to mid-sized organizations, they're not a target. The problem is only like the big ones are like really targeted by like serious hackers. But what happens is there are a lot of like automated bots on the internet. They don't care if you are small or big. They just like kind of like run the script and try to get you. So it's possible that you'll be a victim of them. What you can do. So maybe the easiest thing you could do if your website is hacked is if you are lucky and have backups, like your host provider offer backups of your website, just do a recover like few days a week before, at least to get your websites up and running. So and then obviously you need to reach out to either like update the plugins, do whatever you have to do, or reach out to an agency to help you with trying to fix the problem. If you don't have a backup, that will be really hard because you need some technical, not like expertise to see exactly what's been hacked.
And that's one of those things that comes
yeah,
back to where your website's hosted, right? I know you
correct.
said, I
That's
think
that too.
most of
Yep.
them probably do that nowadays, but you want to
Yeah.
make sure that you have those backups for whoever your hosting provider is.
Correct. Yeah, because that's like first easy thing to do, at least to get your website back, even though like maybe it will be like a couple days a week outdated if you update your website on a daily basis, but at least it's up and running and you can your uh, visitors can access it. Yeah, and then after that, just reaching out to an agency, an expert that will help you try to figure out what's going on. Yep.
Great. So we just got another question in. How do you optimize keywords for SEO?
Good question. I know I just super teased SEO, but we can probably do a whole session on it itself. So maybe keep an eye out for our second webinar series whenever that may be coming. SEO is huge nowadays. It really is sort of how Google in particular, but really web searching in general, is being powered. So when we talk about optimizing keywords for SEO, it really comes down to which specific pages, not even your entire website. You're having your entire website be optimized for SEO does help in general your reputation when it comes to the web, but optimizing specific pages for specific keywords is really the number one thing I would suggest. I'm going to type in just a specific example here, and that is one of our partners at Fairvote. They really wanted to show up first when it comes to ranked choice voting, because it's really the key issue that they're working on. And you'll see here, they've made it. I don't know where Arlington came from, but maybe they're cheating since they're a .gov. I'm not sure. But performing well on this search result is their #1 priority. And and you can see here when you look at their website, it's not even their homepage, even though it's obviously the foundation of what they do. It's not their homepage. It's this page, Our Reforms, that it reads off. It's titled ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting as a phrase exists multiple times within this page. And it's really everywhere. And so the tools like Yoast can help say, okay, well, this is maybe too many times, or you're trying to use too many keywords here. It can really help you optimize or strike that balance between, again, something that Google and the internet really likes to read and something that a person themselves will actually want to read too.
Great, thank you. Wasim, this question's for you. What about two-step or two-factor authorization or authentication? Sorry. Is it easy to set up or worth it?
You're muted.
Thank you, Seth. Yeah, 2FA, two-factor authenticator, highly recommended, not only for your website, but also for any online, including your personal bank account or whatever, because that's like an extra piece of security, even if people have your username and password, cannot access to those services. When it comes to websites and WordPress, yes, it's pretty easy to do. Unfortunately, and hopefully, and I submitted a lot of requests to WordPress.org to add 2FA natively. Is just they haven't. It's kind of like they're working on it, their team. But there are like few plugins that you could use, and I can recommend one on the chat or something that we've been using. We use like 2 or 3, but one is pretty solid. Yeah, highly recommended, easy to use, will save you a lot of headache.
Great.
And the
All right.
irony is definitely not lost that you need a third-party plugin for 2FA right now, but hopefully, Wasim, they'll hear you pretty soon and get it integrated as a native feature.
Yep.
All right, we have one last question and then we'll wrap up the webinar. What is the most challenging part of the content strategy process? And this one goes to Seth.
It's a good question. I think for me, it's that every project is unique and everybody's got their own challenges, KPIs, everything that they're trying to work through. But I'm guessing that question isn't for me, right? I think for a partner that we're working with, we often find that the most challenging piece of that content strategy is just the time that it takes. It's probably the biggest thing that we will ask a partner to do when going through a redesign. So before you really get started or get too far along in the process, you want to make sure that you have some folks on your team that can be dedicated to that process. So, we don't need to know all of the answers to all of the questions that we'll have about your content strategy. But having a decision maker on your team that can make some calls or that, is familiar with the EDs, the executive directors, project planner or strategic plan, can really help to move that process along. And we can make some recommendations too. So at least at IndieTech, we are incredibly flexible in terms of how much we'll ask of you versus how much we'll, make suggestions for and let you pick, from a menu, 1, 2, 3, which strategy do you want? But at the very least, having that team or at least a couple key individuals that can make those calls and dedicate some time to figuring out the new taxonomies or identifying an updated sitemap is really going to help your redesign project be successful.
Thanks, Seth. All right, since we don't have any questions left, we're going to wrap up this webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to discuss a website redesign or have any additional questions specific to your technology needs, please get in touch with us. You can fill out our contact form on our website or email us at info@indietechsolutions.com. Tomorrow, I'll share an email survey along with the webinar recording. If there are any topics and trainings you're interested in, please let us know through the survey. Thanks again and enjoy your day. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us.